Hello, I'm Andy Conte, Director of the Center for Media Innovation at Point Park University in downtown Pittsburgh. We're hosting this series of conversations about how the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting the journalism industry all across the United States. And we're doing this as we're preparing to hand out the second round of funding for the Doris O'Donnell Innovations in Investigative Journalism Fellowship. Today, I'm joined by Ben Smith, media columnist for the New York Times. Before that, Ben was editor-in-chief of Buzzfeed News. He's also written for Politco, the New York Observer, the New York Daily News, and the New York Sun. Ben, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
So in your media column back in late March, whenever the pandemic was really just starting to take hold, you raised this whole issue of how we should be bailing out journalists, but not necessarily bailing out the news organizations or especially the big media companies that own newspapers all across the United States. What exactly did you mean by that?
The main thing that's happening right now in media, which is really, I think, happening in a lot of industries, is that the trends, whatever the trends were that were already happening, are happening faster. What that's meant in media is that advertising, which has been going away for a long time, is going away faster. That people are, print obviously is going away faster. Newspapers are and people are spending more time on the internet. I mean, it's kind of obvious stuff in some ways. Particularly these newspaper chains that own a lot of American newspapers were companies that were either in bankruptcy or collapsing into bankruptcy, that could have been blown over with a feather. And this was a hurricane. And so I think there's this question of like, what should policymakers, philanthropists do in terms of, should we be trying to sort of breathe life into these cadavers, or is there some way to take the thing that ultimately I think we care about, which is journalism and journalists, rather than these companies, and focus on how do we sort of sustain that and revive it really?
We really started to see over the last couple of years, I feel like, where, we were so focused before on these big news organizations that were dying. And now, you're starting to see news organizations growing up, startups, and at the local level, I'm really talking about, especially here in Pittsburgh, where we look across the region and we see that, there were journalists who were working maybe for a big news organization before, but now they're starting their own news outlet around a small geographic area or a small niche topic. And I'm just wondering if you see maybe an opportunity for a renaissance in this period, where everyone's so focused on, the negatives, but maybe there's a positive to come out of it.
Yeah, I mean, to the degree that there is a positive, and I would say it's really limited. Like, I don't think that anybody really sees a path to the scale of local journalism that there was 30 years ago. But I think, you do see that people really realize the value of journalism, that, if you care about what's happening in your neighborhood in Pittsburgh, you're not going to find that from the New York Times. And then the other thing that's happening is, I think, kind of local civic leaders and philanthropists and people who used to give to the ballet, or do give to the ballet and the opera and the sort of usual civic, the education committee and the sort of civic causes, have started, and I think this is an effect of Trump, have started to see journalism as like an appropriate outlet for philanthropy. And that's a huge change. That just was not a thing rich people used to do.
Yeah, but when we look at it, and that's really at the heart of this fellowship that we're giving out, is that even where you get local journalism support, it's not always for investigative reporting. And it's a whole different animal, this idea that you're going to give a journalist weeks or months or sometimes even longer than that to work on a single story. And we're trying to fill that gap with the fellowship. And I'm just curious from your perspective, how concerned you are about investigative reporting, especially at the local level.
I mean, I think investigative reporting has never been like a good business. It's always been kind of an insane thing to do. It's very hard work. It's very time consuming, and you make people hate you. I do think that's a place where nonprofits can come in and sort of do that work, take the and in the sort of best relationships, in a way, take the commercial piece out from these struggling businesses and say, well, we'll pick up the cost for this. But by the way, we have no distribution for our big investigative project. And what we need from a local outlet that has a real connection with its audience is distribution. Yeah. And you see bits and pieces of that here and there. And I'm very plugged into it because my wife runs Brookliner, which is this great New York local one that, your audience in Brooklyn should obviously subscribe to. But I'm not just saying that because she's in the room with me. I think all reporters, like most of us, came up through local journalism, and it's what we feel like is the sort of, truest form of this stuff. It just doesn't seem like nobody has really cracked how you're supposed to do this on the local level. It's partly because in the United States, there was this incredible and kind of unusual tradition of these giant metro newspapers that were such good businesses that they could just, employ, hundreds of journalists. And that just doesn't seem like it's coming back.
Just lastly, I wonder if you could give some advice to a reporter or an editor who might be looking at this opportunity to apply for a $20,000 fellowship and thinking about, what kind of story to do with that kind of money. Do you have some advice for them? What would you suggest they do?
I just think stories, my thought is I just think you never come up with stories sitting on a Zoom call speculating about what a story could be. You got to call everyone you know and say what's the crazy thing that needs looking into, and listen to every source. And the best stories are always come from tips, and often the best tips come from somebody who has never given a tip to a journalist before and never will again, but is just somebody coincidentally or through some random connection who has one story. And every single person in your life has like at least one story. And if you just need to like get that tip, and you only need one.
Yeah. Ben, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for helping us get the word out.
Yeah, thank you. This is a great cause. Take care.
For more information about the Doris O'Donnell Innovations and Investigative Journalism Fellowship, please go to dorisodonnellfellowship.com. And to learn more about the Center for Media Innovation, you can go to pointpark.edu/CMI. The deadline for this year's application is June 30th. We look forward to seeing your proposals.